Well, welcome everyone to our Keys Masterclass. This is part 2 of a some-part series. Pete's going to be talking about a whole bunch of different keys sounds, crafting sounds. He'll tell you more about it. But if you're watching from one of our Australian campuses outside of Hills or even one of our global campuses, we hope that you find this helpful. And yeah, over to Pete. Let's give him a hand.
Cool. So the last one I did, I covered pianos and pads and layering of pads and everything. This one I'm going to go a little bit more in depth, so hopefully I don't lose all of you. I'll try to take it slow and just, first of all, I'm going to start off with a few Mainstage tricks and tips and stuff. Then we'll do complex pads, just showing you some of the envelopes and filters and stuff you can do. Moving on to like rhythmic pads and arps and lead sounds and that kind of thing. So yeah, let's get started. So I think last time I was on Mainstage 2. Can anyone remember? I think I was. But I found out a little a trick that means I can do Mainstage 3, because every time I would go to Mainstage 3.3, I think this one is, every 5 or 10 minutes, whenever I was playing a piano, it would glitch and it would like almost like stutter. And stop for a second and play. And obviously when you're playing in church, you don't want that to happen, especially when we're streaming and stuff. So that's why I always stuck with Mainstage 2.2. But the reason why I found out was because I had autosave in Mainstage on. So every 5 minutes, it was trying to save the template while I'm playing a patch. So I'm going to show you quickly how to turn that off if you've got that on. So here we go. I'll just move this down so I can talk and use the computer. So Mainstage preferences, go to general. And autosave. I had that on every 5 minutes, which is stupid. Apparently, if you run Mainstage in performance mode, it doesn't save, but I always run it in edit mode. This is performance mode. So you don't have to worry about it, I think, if you're running a performance mode. I haven't checked that, so double check that, but that's what was causing all my glitches. So make sure you turn autosave off and just manually save it whenever you want to save it. Another thing that's really helpful, because the main thing we wanted to do when we're running Mainstage is to use all your computer's resource just for Mainstage. So we don't want Wi-Fi on, we don't want anything else running in the background, eating up CPU. Here's another little trick that I found out recently too. If you go to applications, find out where your Mainstage application is, right mouse click, show package contents. No, actually, it's not that. My bad. Get info, that's the one. There's a little button here that you can tick. It says open and low resolution. And basically what it's doing is just lowering the resolution, the graphics resolution of Mainstage. So I can't even tell the difference between high resolution and low resolution on a screen this small. You might be able to tell on this big one, but we're not really worried about how good your screen looks when we're playing in church. We're more worried about the CPU usage and sound. So that's another trick you can do to free up some more CPU on your computer. Okay, I think I talked a little bit about clipping and all that stuff in the other video that we recorded last week, so I won't cover that. Let's get on to some pads. Okay, like I said, last week we covered basic pads and layering them with pianos. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth this time and kind of show you some different tricks and tips for with filters and things like that. So I'm going to open up this pad here. Okay, so I'll just play it so you can hear what it is. It's just a warm pad. And it's not working. Give me a sec. I think I have to go. Okay. It defaulted to my built-in speakers, not my audio interface. So awesome. So this is going to take a little while to load. Because I've got so many patches in here, it's got to load everything into RAM. But while I'm doing that, a little trick you can do, you can have a master Mainstage template that has basically all your sounds in it. Depending on how much RAM you have, the more RAM you have, the more patches you can put in one template. And then when you get to a church service, you can delete all the other patches that you don't want and only have a really small amount of patches, maybe the ones you're using in your Sunday set list, and maybe a few extras just in case someone throws a surprise song at you or something that wasn't on the set list. And then save it as current template. And then that way, if you ever have any problems and you have to restart, you can open that template a lot quicker than this is taking ages because I've got so many patches loaded. But that's a little trick if you're running it in church and you want to quickly bring up your Mainstage template. Here we go, we're done. Okay, take 2. There we go. So basic warm pad, nothing fancy about it. I'm going to talk a little bit about attack, decay, sustain, release. Now, every patch, no matter what plugin you're using, I'm using Omnisphere, but the Juno plugins, even keyboards like this will have features where you can adjust the attack, decay, sustain, release. So I'm going to talk about exactly what that means. It's hard to kind of see visually what it's doing with these sliders. See, ADSR stands for attack, decay, sustain, release. But you can get a visual representation of it by going in here. So the attack of the sound is pretty straightforward. It's how long it takes for the sound to build to its maximum volume. So that's this point from here to here. So the x-axis is volume, and the y-axis is time. So I could change that by doing this, and then it will come in a lot quicker. If I do it that way, it's going to take longer to build into the sound. Okay, so the decay is the time it takes for it to get from this point to this point here. Can we all say that on the screen? Now, the decay doesn't actually affect the sound if the sustain, I'll go back to here. If the sustain is full, the decay doesn't actually affect the sound at all. But if your sustain is different, then it's going to affect it. So decay is how long it takes to get to the second point. So it's going to swell in, and then it's going to slowly drop off till it gets to this volume here, and then it's going to stay there until I release the key. See how it dropped in volume? And now when I release it, that's the last point. That's the time it takes for it to get to 0. So that's kind of that explained. You can go even more in depth. That's volume. So that was volume on the x-axis and time on the y. I think I talked about low-pass filters last time. You can do the same kind of thing with a low-pass filter. So I'm going to bring up the second part of the sound, which is this. Okay, hear that? Now I'm going to go to the filter section of this B. So that's what it's doing volume-wise. It's similar setup to the other sound. Now the filter, what it's doing is the filter's open when I first hit the keys, and then over time it's filtering the cutoff frequency down. So it's starting off bright and then getting darker and darker until it's almost inaudible at the end. Well, it's still there, but it drops. If I could bring it down even further and it would be even more drastic. Or I could move this here and it's going to drop really quickly. It's hard to hear because the attack's coming up and it's dropping before the attack comes in, but if I moved it maybe there. So I'm going to reset the patch and I'll show you with those two things in. The other thing that I've done with this patch is with the mod wheel down, you're only getting part A of the sound. With the mod wheel up, you're getting both. And the filter is also velocity sensitive on the B part of it. So if I hit it harder, it's going to open it up and be louder. And the filter doesn't quite open up as much. So that's where is it? Filter. This is the velocity little knob there. That's meaning that obviously the harder you hit, it's going to open up more, less. If you don't want that to happen, you just turn the velocity down to 0 and it will just be constant the whole time. So I'll play you a little something with that and show you kind of how it works. Move the mod wheel up, bring in the other sound. Cool. So when I moved the mod wheel up, I brought part B in. The harder I hit, the brighter that second part got. So that's just a few little ideas that you can kind of put in if you're making your own sounds or mucking around with different patches and stuff. That one would obviously only work with a really slow, kind of emotional song. That's kind of how I designed it to be really, I don't know, just a lot of motion in the sound and stuff. It wouldn't work if you're doing a praise song or young and free. When I'm doing pads and stuff for young and free stuff, I have fast attack, usually fast release, and have it really bright as well. So when I move the mod wheel up, you can actually cut through the mix and exactly get the really high stuff. But for slower worship stuff, you can get away with kind of more mellow pads like that. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about sidechaining. Does anyone know what sidechaining is? You would have heard it. I guarantee you would have heard it, even if you didn't know what it meant. And the original way they would sidechain a pad, nowadays they do it with LFOs and other things, but the original way they would do it is they'd have a pad sound, they'd have a kick drum or some other thing, and it would, every time the kick would hit, it would what's called sidechain a compressor that's on the pad, and it would bring the volume down of that pad. And that's called sidechaining because you're actually sidechaining the compressor on your pad with another instrument, and it's usually the kick. But these days, we don't have to have a kick drum. We can actually do it with inside like Omnisphere. I'll show you with different envelopes and stuff. So this is simulating sidechaining. Let's try that again. See, visually you can see it building up and building and dropping and then coming back up. That's volume. You could also set that. You could also set that to a filter, so it was opening up a low-pass filter instead of a volume. That gives you a slightly different effect. And the way you sync it to a song, in your DAW you have to make sure the tempo of your DAW is at the right speed. So I'm trying to remember where it is. I think it might be up here. Here we go, attributes. There we go. Sometimes this is not clicked. Just click that, type in this, the tempo of the song, and then you'll be able to sync it up. A lot of the time, we try to leave all the rhythmic stuff on tracks, if possible, because it's hard to sync it up exactly. So if you have the choice of doing it live or running it on a track, definitely choose the track because you know it's going to be perfectly in time. I like to do rhythmic stuff on praise songs a little bit. It works if you've got good timing, it doesn't if you're off. But a little trick that I've found, it's not the perfect way of doing it, but you can actually bump up the tempo and then bump it back if you play the first chord not in time. So once you trigger it, it'll stay at the right tempo as long as you don't release all the keys and then do it again. So that's too fast. Let's make that 70. There we go. Because I'm screen capturing, my computer's playing up a little bit. But you can bump it up and then bump it back. You wouldn't have been able to hear that because I only put it up by 1 BPM and then put it back. So that's what I do sometimes if I'm trying to sync with the click and I get it not completely on. If it's too slow, I'll bump it up until it's in time and then I'll bump it back. And once it's in time, as long as I create legato notes and don't, it will stay for the whole of the song in time. Cool? I'm going to show you the classic way of doing it. So I'm going to open up. This is a Young and Free patches I've got from Tim and Jack. I think it's this one. So he had a different type of plugin that doesn't have the features that Omnisphere does, and there's no way of kind of drawing in those modulation LFO effects. So I had to do it the classic way. So I'm going to show you exactly how, this is what they used to do like years and years back when they didn't have computers, when they were working with analog compressors, analog desks, everything else. They didn't have the option of doing it this way. So no, I don't want to download. Okay, so what he's done here is he's got a piano, which you won't hear because it's not going out any output. It's simply being used to sidechain the pad. And then if I go to the compressor, see up in the top corner, you select what instrument you want the compressor to be triggered with. And it was bus 1, I think, which is where this is sending. So this piano is sending out bus 1, and that's triggering the sidechain. So let's leave it up there. Now, when I hit C at the bottom, C2, you can see the needle too. Every time I hit C2, it's triggering that compressor and dropping the volume. So that's the old school way of doing it, and you can actually simulate it in Mainstage, like with plugins, obviously. So I just wanted to show you that, because the plugin that it's using, I'll just open it up quickly, is a replica of a Juno old analog keyboard, and that doesn't have all the features of Omnisphere, so that was the only way you could physically get that ducking effect. You were saying that you put audio in from the kick drum, or someone was saying, was it you? No, it was you, that's right. That's another option. You can actually put audio into your interface, but it's getting a bit crazy when you've got ways of doing it inside the box. But get creative, you can do that as well. Okay, let's close this, and we'll go back to my other template. Is this helpful? Yep, cool. Another thing that makes it quicker to load is if you don't close the application. So see how I just closed the window? I didn't close the whole of Mainstage, because every time you close Mainstage, it has to reload all your audio units. And audio units are basically plugins and effects and everything. So it should be quicker because I didn't close Mainstage. Still not super fast though. Cool. Okay, I'm going to talk about arps. So this patch that I've got here, it's using an arp fixture. And all I've done is set it on 16ths, really short. So you can make that longer or bigger or whatever. And I've set the bias on the arp. So that means no matter how hard or soft I hit the keyboard, it's going to stay at the same volume. Okay, I've got the mod wheel mapped to the low pass filter, so I'll show you what this is doing. It's weird, this plugin I've got always creates audio pops and stuff, so I have to be really careful. But that's just a side note. So basically all I do is play a chord, and see this here, it's the 16ths, and I've got it up. You can make it go up and down, or you can make it go up 2 octaves if you wanted. Or up 4. You can basically do whatever you want. And in Omnisphere 2 and Omnisphere 1, you couldn't do this. But Omnisphere 2, you can actually put in notes. So you can go start on this note, then go up 2 notes or 2 semitones, then go down 4 semitones. And so you could literally program in a riff or something and hold 1 note down, and it'll play whatever riff for whatever song, and then save it as the song. Then you just sit there playing 1 note. It'll be perfectly in time, playing all the notes of the riff of the song. But we're not going to do that. But yeah, it's really powerful how you can do that inside Omnisphere. I usually use this sound on, I think it was Relentless Remix, and This Is Living. But again, because it's a rhythmic sound, it's pretty hard to make it perfectly in time. So if you have the option to use rhythmic sounds on tracks, do that. Okay, here's another version. It's a different type of ARP, and instead of single note ARPs, it's doing a rhythm. And see this thing here? Instead of the other one was set to ARP, this is set to chord. So I can play a chord. Rather than me trying to play it, because there's going to be inconsistencies in volume and timing and everything, I get the ARP to do all the work. And that was a patch that I used for Beneath the Waters, Brooks' song. And yeah, I cheated. I made the ARP do all the work. And again, the low pass filter is mapped to the mod wheel, so I can start it off mellow. It's bringing in harmonics and stuff as well when I turn it up. Again, before you use something like an ARP, make sure that the tempo is the tempo of the song. But yeah, I could talk about lead sounds as well. Let's quickly find a patch that has lead sounds. But basically all a lead sound is something that has a prominent front end. So it's got a fast attack. A lot of lead sounds will actually have the filter spike. Remember how I showed you the filter on the pad? If you set that up to do a quick spike at the beginning and then fade off, it gives you a really kind of like a plucky effect, and you can use that as an effect to make your leads cut through the mix a bit more. Let me find the pad that I was wanting. I've got a pad set up here, and on this one is a lead sound that I bring in, so without the lead. Now let me figure out which one it is. This is the lead sound. It's a sample of a Prophet, but it's got a lot of movement, pitch modulation in it. Another thing, if you're not getting enough attack out of your sounds, whether it's a pad or a lead sound, a lot of the time it can be the sample. So if you change the sample start time to later, it all depends on how the company sampled a sound. So they might have sampled the sound with a slow attack, and no matter how much you turn the attack down and try to make it faster, if the sample is really slow, that can affect, obviously, the beginning of it. So always look at that. I know I'll just quickly go to, see if I can find it. Too many patches in here. Here we go. Here's an example of a pad that's been sampled, but it's got a slow attack in it. So let's turn off the reverse piano. So this is a pad that I use for oceans. But see how the attack's already low and yet it still has a slow attack? That's because I sampled the Prophet keyboard with a slow attack. If I wanted to make it faster, I'd have to move the sample start time. See how it's fast? Whereas with it down there, it's... But that suits the song that we used it on, obviously Oceans. When I picked this sound, I didn't realize it, but it kind of gives you the sense of water because it's got a lot of motion. The sound is a slow attack. It's really... So that's another thing. When you're picking sounds for songs, think about what you're trying to portray, what emotion, what the song's trying to say. Because if I'd used a really fast attack, bright pad for Oceans, it kind of wouldn't have had the same effect and kind of wouldn't have been agreeing with the song because the sound and stuff kind of wouldn't match that Oceans kind of feel. That's a quick kind of overview of more complex pads, arps, leads and stuff. Do you have any questions? I'm sure some of you guys do. Yes? No? Yeah, go for it.
So I saw that it's more specific about stuff I'm seeing. You're running the SSL plugins.
Yep.
The UA one. So the plugins that you're running that I'm seeing on the screen, are you running the Waves plugins or is it the UA?
Okay, good question. The SSL that I'm using is the Waves. The reason being is the UAD plugins run off hardware. They don't run off your computer. So I've tried using I've tried using UAD plugins inside Mainstage and the latency is too big. So I can't get around it. The only way you can use UAD plugins without latency is to run them on your output. So if I wanted to, I could. This is like what's happening on the output of my UAD. I'd have to put it, you have to send it to like a virtual out and then put it on that and then there will be no latency. So it's a little bit annoying. I think UAD is more designed for mixing in the box than it is for live performance unless you want to do it that way. And even so, you can put on that, but there's no way of controlling that by MIDI. So if you had like a really nice Moog low-pass filter from UAD, there's no way of mapping it to a mod wheel or MIDI controller or anything. So that's why I'm not actually using it live, but I do use it in the studio when I'm doing tracks and stuff in Logic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. No. One other thing, you might not be able to see it here. I'm using this thing. It's a mono Mogafoga or Mugafuga, depending on what part of the world you're from. I think Americans say Mogafoga, and we say Mugafuga, and they always laugh at me if I say it in America. But basically, that's an analog overdrive and tremolo pedal. It's only mono, and it doesn't have true bypass. So I couldn't take the outputs of my computer interface, plug it straight in, and then out to front of house into the DI. The reason being, one, it's mono, so all your sounds would be mono. Your pianos, your pads, everything would be summed down to mono. Actually, it would only be one side, so it would be the left or the right side. The other thing is it's not true bypass. It bypasses the effect, but it doesn't bypass the analog circuitry, so it colors the sound. So the way I've set it up, I've got Mainstage sending out, not every sound goes through this. My Rhodes does, some of my lead sounds go through it. So I've got Mainstage sending it out, output 3. So it comes out of the interface into the Mogafoga. Then it comes back out of that into the input on the interface. And then I mix it inside the interface. The reason being, if I took it back into the interface and then put it back into Mainstage and mixed it inside Mainstage, it would add latency to it. But because I'm mixing it, the computer sounds and the Mogafoga inside the box, it's not adding any latency. So I'll quickly show you kind of what it does. It's not an essential piece of hardware. It's just something that I like to add to give a little bit more overdrive to my like Rhodes and stuff. You can hear when I crank it up. It's that kind of really nice warm, and I've got control over how much I want of that. Again, that plugin always pops when I go to it. I do it on something like this as well. Just without it, it's only a tiny bit of it, and then turn it up. See, it kind of sounds gutless without it. That's why I'm using it. You can get plugins that simulate analog overdrive, but there's just something about real analog circuitry that I love the sound of it. So that's why I'm bringing that along to church and using that on my Rhodes and some of my lead sounds. Cool. Any last questions? Yes.
When you come to church, do you bring your OB with you, and do you like to play with it live, or do you just mainly want to use it in the studio when you're designing your sounds and you're making the patches for it?
Good question. Yeah, I've got an OB6, which is the analog keyboard. It's a modern version of an old Oberheim. I do bring it to church sometimes. I'll have to do another class talking about that because I've actually got Mainstage set up to talk to my OB6. So I mix patches in, so I mix sounds from my computer and my OB. I've got the low pass filter on the OB mapped to this mod wheel as well as my other patches. So whenever I'm moving the mod wheel up, it's opening up the analog low pass filter. So I've got it set up really, really good like that. You can also get Mainstage to send program changes. So I change patch and it'll tell my OB6 to change the patch and set it up exactly. So I don't actually have to touch the OB when I'm bringing it. I don't use it all the time. When I'm playing piano, which I've been for the last month, I don't need that because it's piano and Rhodes. But when I'm on keys, I'll definitely bring it to like Color Conference or Hillsong Conference and stuff like that. But I've actually sampled the OB6, so I do use samples of it live if I don't have the OB6 then there. And the other thing with analog gear is it does go out of tune, so I've got to keep checking to make sure it's in tune. They're getting better. The new ones are getting a lot better at staying in tune, but you're never guaranteed for them to be 100% in tune all the time. And it's obviously a mission to tour with if I ever wanted to take it overseas, because it's expensive, it's fragile, temperature changes will affect the tuning of it as well. So yeah, that's why I've sampled it. So I've got the option of having it just a sample or the real thing. Cool.
For anyone here and anyone who might be watching, there's probably people along the spectrum of people that have had gear for years and have had the opportunity to spend thousands of dollars on their gear. And there might be new people who are just getting started. Maybe they're just building their own rig at the moment. Used a lot of Omnisphere. Is there any other software you'd recommend? Any kind of starter packs?
Yeah. So if you just get into computers, don't feel like you have to go out and buy every piece of software. I think when I first started using laptops in church, I only had one piece of software. There wasn't Mainstage. I had Logic. I think I even bought it secondhand because Logic was like $800 back then, and now it's like super cheap. So I had Logic, and I bought what was it? Synthergy grand piano. So I just had pianos. But now that Mainstage is out, obviously that would be the first thing you'd buy. Mainstage, it's $30 off the App Store. Another piece of software which is really good if you can't afford Omnisphere, because Omnisphere is quite expensive, is Sylenth. Sylenth 1 from Lena Digital. The Young and Free guys use that plugin quite a lot. It does your kind of Young and Free stuff, your really bright pads and leads and all that kind of stuff, and it's about a third the price of Omnisphere. But if you want warm, big pads with a lot of variety and atmospheric kind of stuff, Omnisphere is amazing. So there's that. Pianos, the one that we're using most in church is from Native Instruments. It's called the Giant. You can get it in the complete set if you want to value for money, like you want to buy lots or just buy it. They often have 50% off sales, so you kind of wait for those companies to give a 50% off sale at like a Black Friday or something. So that's a piano. The Rhodes that most of us use at church is Scarby Mark 1, which is also from Native Instruments. Again, if you wanted to buy a bundle, you like Complete, I think, has the Rhodes, Whirlies, pianos, Massive, a whole lot of other things. So that's another option. But don't feel like you have to go out and buy endless software. When I first got my computer, I bought one piece of software, used it for probably 6 months. Then I added a Rhodes. I didn't have, Omnisphere wasn't out then, it was Atmosphere. I didn't buy that until quite a few years later. And you need to get to know your software. Like, don't feel like you need to, because if you do go out and buy everything, you'll be learning like so many different pieces of software and you won't get the most out of each piece. So Mainstage, 1 or 2 pieces of software, use that for 6 months, then get one more if you want. And yeah, but most of our sounds we're using in church are from Omnisphere, if anyone's wondering. So yeah, cool.
Can you tell me the thing again? What was the name of this?
This thing?
Yeah.
It's a Moogerfoger, Moogerfoger. I'm really bad at spelling. I think that's how you say it. And it's the ring modulator, so it's a tremolo, but I'm just using it for overdrive. I'm not actually using it for the ring modulator. I could. Let me show you what the ring modulator does. So that's bypass. So it gives you tremolo. You can change the speed to the point where it will self-oscillate if I turn up too much. So that's what that does.
Cool. So with your rhythmic sounds, is there any way you can sync that up to the tracks?
I've been thinking about that. The only way you could do it would be to somehow send MIDI clock from the tracks to your rig, which we haven't tried. We should try it one day, but in my head I'm like, there's one more thing that can go wrong. But in theory, it is very possible. But like I said, if we're running tracks, there's ARP stuff on the tracks anyway, so we'll just kind of do that. But that is something we should probably look into and see if we can, because we'd have to send MIDI clock from there, and then if the drummer fires his click instead of that, then we won't have the MIDI clock from the tracks, and we'd have to get MIDI clock from, so it could be a bit crazy, but it's something to look into. We should definitely. And that way, yeah, you wouldn't have to try to play it in time, it would just be synced. Yeah. Any more questions? Should we wrap it up?
Let's give Pete a hand. Thanks, Pete. Hope that's been helpful for you guys, for anyone watching at some of our other campuses. If anyone watching on camera or whatever, if you have questions for Pete, maybe just find his Instagram.
Yeah, or
like Peter A. James. Is that your Instagram? You can ask some questions on Instagram.
Or Facebook. I got Peter James Productions is my Facebook, or peterjames@peterjamesproductions.com. You can email me and hopefully I can get back to everyone. But yeah.
In future masterclasses we can address stuff as well. And
cool.
Yeah. Thanks
Sounds
everyone.
good.
Love you. Bye.
Later.